Hello again. Now that I've gotten some work done with the flooring, it's time to finish prepping some additional wood for putting it down as flooring. So the first thing we got to do is make sure we've got everything treated with borax just to help ensure there aren't any issues with the bugs and the mold and fungus. And these ones I was getting ready to load them on the trailer the way we did the last time, even though it was a little more nerve-wracking. It actually worked really well. And you can see there in the background on the left I've actually got the trailer backed up pretty close to this pile specifically so I could do that, and then I realized I had this stand over here with some more wood under it drying and figured, well, why not? That'll be a little easier, a little less moving since it's moving them towards the spare room. Figured that just, more efficient use of time and energy. And this worked pretty well. We ended up getting all of them treated and sprayed, and then we actually took advantage of the overhang on the spare room and just kind of stacked them all up there to keep them out of the way, let them dry. It's an unusually clear, sunny day for the middle of April up here in Pacific Northwest. So it was a good day to do this. We're currently covered in our typical gray sky. Our forecast for the next 10 days is 8 days of rain and 2 days of potentially sun. That has been a welcome challenge from living in the desert, where it's safer to assume it's not going to rain than to ever think that it's actually going to rain. I remember always, if I forgot a tool outside, it'd be a few days, potentially before I'd use it again, and I'd think, man, where did I use this last? Oh, that's right, out there at the rabbit hutch or out there in the garden or whatever. And I'd go out and it'd just be waiting. I somehow left forgot a tool, a drill, impact driver actually, when I was doing some milling with the Alaskan mill a while back, and everything else got brought home. It just got missed, and it was sitting out there on the ground next to one of the logs, and it was probably, I don't know, 3 weeks before maybe 4 weeks even, before I finally realized where I had used it last, what I was doing when I used it last, and went over there and said, hey, is there an impact driver sitting out there? And sure enough, my little DeWalt impact driver was sitting right there where I'd left it, next to the drill, or next to the log where I'd pulled the screws out. And it had been rained on, I bet, at least 14 or 20 of the days that it was out there. It had been rained on a lot. I was afraid it was a goner. And that was 3 years ago. And that little impact driver is still the one I'm using in all the videos today. So there's definitely something good to be said about that. Alright, so now we've got all the boards treated, and I've got the middle of the trailer subfloor finished. So now I've got to clean off all of the area for the last third, or technically the first third as you're walking into it, and there's quite a bit of scraps and things that have been kept in here to stay dry. And clearly there's quite a bit of sawdust, as you can see as it comes through the rays of sunshine. So we made a pretty hefty pile of scrap wood through the process of doing all this. And if I had a place, like some of them were decent sized pieces of like the therefor and the offcuts from the flooring. If I had a decent place to actually store lumber, then I would definitely have been keeping a lot more of it, but we just haven't gotten a barn or a drying shed or anything like that, workshop, whatever, built yet, so a lot of that becomes just firewood. It's snowing sawdust. Trying to blow everything out. I came to the conclusion last night as I was working on some equipment boxes and doing a fair amount of routing to, template routing to cut holes into the boxes and things like that. I think I'm going to have to start using the vacuum to clean up the sawdust so that we can harvest it and actually dump it in the chicken coop. Since all of this sawdust is essentially dry, it makes it a bit more usable for putting in the chicken coop. And so these are the cottonwood boards that I'll be using for the just the mouse block layer. And we'll get them all in place, and then I can start working on trimming them down and putting them in place, and I believe, if I remember correctly, by the time I finish this this afternoon, everything's ready. So the next day, the next video, the next day will be the subfloor actually going down. And that was definitely a good day. Realizing that there's no more holes to fall through, no more worrying about whether or not I need to, step carefully. Although I do still have to step a little bit carefully. Some of the boards inadvertently were cut at different thicknesses slightly. I had originally been cutting on the 4/4 scale, so every 1 inch marking is actually 1 1/8 inch thick. That way it's accounting for leaving enough material to plane the board down to the actual size that you're measuring at. And most of the stuff that I've done was milled at that size just for the extra thickness, extra stability. So like all of my rafters are measured at 4x6, and they are actually 4.5 by 6 3/4. And all of the posts, for instance, were measured at 4x4, so they're all 4.5 by 4.5. And it just my thought process at the time was that it will just make things easier, and I don't have to worry about whether or not there's knots, or there's a little bit of wane, or there's a little bit of checking things like that. And just little more peace of mind, since I'm not an engineer or a I don't know what they're actually called, but one of the people that goes around and inspects and certifies lumber. Inspector, stamper, certifier. So one of the challenges I mentioned in the last time when we were doing the subfloor is that there's got to be something for the floor to actually attach to, so I was just cutting a bunch of little pieces to put in between the end wall posts, so I can make those subfloor and mouse block boards a little bit easier to place down, so they'll have something to screw on. These are basically just essentially like the fire block bricks or blocks. They're just only, you know, partway through. That particular one was pretty tight, so it got pounded into place, which is always a good thing. It's been an interesting process building this, and it's been a rewarding process on the one hand because I put a lot more thought and design into it than the other sheds, because there's the chance that it'll be moved since it's on a trailer frame, but also because this is the first structure we're building that is actually intended for essentially habitation. So there's, you know, a few odd little mistakes here and there that I learned from. We were discussing yesterday the idea of mouse proofing, and Emily brought up the challenge that I hadn't actually thought about, but the fact that a mouse can crawl through a gap as small as a 1/4 inch, and I don't know, like, is it a 1/4 inch tall? Is it a 1/4 inch wide? Can they fit through a 1/4 inch by a 1/4 inch? I don't know, but supposedly they can fit through a gap that's as small as a 1/4 inch thick. So with the siding boards opening up as they dry and shrink, the sealing them from the weather is pretty easy because we just, you know, put a batten in between there and it hides it and makes it look good, and problem solved. But then at the bottom, she brought up the challenge that can a mouse climb the floor joist, the rim joist, up into the gap between the boards and behind the batten, in between the batten and the rim joist. And I don't know that, so that's something I'll have to research and figure out. It'll make it difficult and maybe impossible for them if, you know, once we get the insulation in place, because that'll go fill that gap completely. But I don't know, we'll have to research a little further to see if there's actually something else that we need to do for that. And yeah, I don't know. So this particular one was a little tighter than it should have been, and we'll come back to that, throwing that scrap board in a minute, but these were definitely intended to be, you know, tight. They're supposed to fill that gap. So while on the one hand it would actually be nice to have had enough pieces or enough logs to do like a full 14-inch board that I could then throw down there, and having two pieces works fairly well, actually. It allows me to get a nice solid fit. Sometimes they like to fight, like that last one I just put in. You can see on the right it popped up, so I'll have to go back and temp that down later. When we come back with the I'm also putting them in as tightly as I can because they are also going to shrink a little bit. And see, there's where we'll helps if you aim properly when you're throwing something. It's a good thing it's a action camera, so it's designed to take a little bit of a beating. But anyway, so when we come back in to prep for the installation, we will probably actually give everything another coat of borax just to be on the safe side. I mean, it's only a couple of bucks for a box of borax, and as we've learned, a box covers a fair amount. So here's one of those scraps. I was gonna went back in the footage to show some real time, just because I thought people might enjoy some of the bloopers or mistakes or whatever. But this one was a good throw. Miss. This one not so much. This is the one where I knocked the camera over. Hit it square. Oh, I take that back. That was a second miss, so it's the third time is the charm. Anyway, so yeah, so we'll spray them again, and then we'll see if we need to add or change out these pieces based on how they shrink and move when we get to that point. But boom, there we go. And there's a lovely view of some sawdust-covered dirt and some river rock. So with that, we'll call this video an end for the day. Thank you as always for watching. Catch you on the next one, and stay safe. God bless you and yours.